The following program is a presentation of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio in iTunes. Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
Welcome back to Options Insider Radio, live from sunny Boca Raton, Florida, and we're croquet side here at the Boca Raton Resort and Club, which is our preferred recording venue these days. There's a few croquet mallets in the background. It's a nice, quiet place to record. And I am joined by an old friend of the show who hasn't been on in a while, but we dragged him kicking and screaming back on. And he is, of course, Jeromee Johnson, the head of BATS Options. Jeromee, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here always.
So yeah, we wanted to have you back on because, like we said, it has been a while since we've talked about BATS and what's been going on at BATS. So you've had your first full year under the belt now. You're official in terms of most of your first calendar year. And looking back now, obviously you have the hubbub of the launch is behind you. The post-launch shakedown period is behind you. So looking back now at that first kind of calendar year of operations, how are you standing now compared to your expectations and where you thought you would be at this period? And don't just say you're completely in line. Let's we're exactly where we want to be.
Yeah, no, you know what? I wish we had 100% market share, right?
There you go.
I can, or if not 100%, call it 20%. I wish I had 20% market share, and we've got a long, long ways to go. We are almost exactly a year from launch. We put up our first trade Feb 26th, March last year. It was our first full month. When we came out the gates, we said very, very publicly that we thought, a year into it, kind of being in that 3 to 5% range was a good, aggressive but realistic target for us. Honestly, there were some things that the first 6-9 months didn't go according to plan. And so when we came out the gates, we had our 2030 pricing, and that's what it was. It was very simple. It was very clean. That's what it was for all different securities. That's what it was for all different participants. And we received many, many compliments on the simplicity of the pricing. We didn't get a whole heck of a lot of market share with that pricing.
Save your compliments. Send me the volume. There we go.
Yeah. So it worked on one front. It didn't work on the other front. Going into the beginning of this year, when we rolled out the NBBO setter program and things like that, we sit here today with 3.5-4%, so on the shorter end of that 3 to 5% range, but I'm very excited about the momentum that we've been able to capture the first part of this year, and it's a great trajectory, and feeling great about the prospects going forward.
I'm glad you brought up the pricing, because I obviously have that on my mind as well. You launched with that one specific pricing scheme. You've since revised it a little bit, so let me just illuminate it for our listeners who may not be familiar with what the current pricing scheme is. And you can, of course, correct me if I grossly overstate this, but It looks like for firms, it's a 25 to 35 cent rebate for making, and then 38 cent debit for taking. Obviously, you're maker-taker. And then, of course, you also have the for customers, they get a quarter for a rebate and a 28 cent debit for taking liquidity. So am I right on all those fronts?
Yeah, so that's the baseline, the pricing, the core maker-taker, and then
of course there's the NBBO component as well.
The big juicy carrot, and a big part of the momentum that we have is, again, regardless of capacity, firm, market maker, customer, when you come in and you create a new price level in the market, when you set the NBBO, there's a big juicy 50 cent make credit that's above and beyond anything else out there in the marketplace.
That is probably the more unique aspect of the new pricing. And you're essentially incentivizing price improvement in a lot of ways then, which is,
absolutely
a good movement for, I think, a lot of exchanges and a lot of customers like that sort of. And you've seen a lot of uptake, you think, since you've launched that new model?
That's been one of the real primary drivers of recent growth and momentum. And you think about what does it take to grow a new marketplace? And then to the extent that we want to have the best price available in the market, you want to create a new price level. If there's one specific type of volume that we can incent, it's that NBBO setting volume. It's far and above better than any sort of marketing campaign that we can run. If we can incent the right sort of volume and reward the right sort of volume, it's been working very, very well.
So you'd say the bulk of the new share you guys are getting is in that 50-cent maker bracket then, as opposed to some of the other stuff? It's mostly people coming in and making and improving the MBBO and getting that 50-cent range?
Folks are actively and aggressively targeting the new pricing program, yeah. Again, not... So you sit down and talk with a random options that market maker. Every one of them believes that they set the market and everybody else is with, right? Yeah. Psychologically, I think it plays well. Obviously, every trade that goes up can't be done at a new setting price, but getting folks to come in and kind of having that out there is really incenting the right behavior that's tightening up the market and driving volume.
Let's just hit on that really quick before we move on from the pricing, just the mechanics of that. Let's say you are the liquidity provider and you do set the new price, you approve MBBO by a penny, whatever it is. They get that rebate then for all the transactions, all the contracts they do at that new price, or is it just for the initial transaction? How does that work?
Yeah, so
the price hovers around there for a while, they can be getting a 50-cent credit for quite a while.
Yeah, well, so that order that comes in, we are an order-driven marketplace, right? So markets $1.20 by $1.50. Liquidity provider comes in and sets a $1.30 price level, right? So now it's $1.30 by $1.50. That order, that when it comes in, that sets the new $1.30 price level, is flagged as, here's an NBBO setting order. Any and all executions against that order are eligible for the credit. So if they come in and they set it with 1,000 contracts, then all 1,000 contracts that, to the extent they eventually execute, they're eligible. If they come in and they set the NBBO and then nobody ever trades against them, then there's obviously no credit there. But they come in and they set the market. Here's our 1,000 contracts. Market further tightens to $1.35, widens back out to $1.30. If they left that order there, that $1.30 order is still eligible.
That's my next question. What happens when it moves and comes back?
Right. So as long as that order is still there, then that order, again, it was flagged upon entry as something that set the NBBO. They're still eligible for the credit, even if it doesn't trade until the end of the day. Now, again, if they cancel their order, they move it around, then, again,
it's a good incentive then to keep the orders in the book, too. So
absolutely.
It's interesting. That's interesting. So that's an interesting scheme. I like it. But, obviously, I don't want to delve into buzzwords, and everyone loves throwing around the HFT stuff these days. But whenever you talk about options pricing, that inevitably does comes up. You hear a lot of talk these days about the evil high freak guys coming in and arbing what has become essentially a very Byzantine fee structure across all the various exchanges. Have you seen a lot of activity or interest on that front, people coming in? And obviously 50 cents is an attractive rebate. People would want, if they're going to arb fees, they would want to come after that. Have you seen a lot of the new share you're getting coming from these guys who are essentially arbing fees in the different exchanges, you think? Or
I would say we've seen more traction, really, from the classic market makers, the bulk quoters, who are active and have the capability to set the NBBO, who have the ability to drive the market, turn the market in a much broader range of series than what most quote-unquote high-frequency guys are capable of really trading in. Now again, that 50-cent rebate is absolutely, I expect it to be attractive to anybody and everybody, whether you're on the high frequency side or not. I think the rebate certainly plays a bigger part in the models, the baseline models of those guys. But where they're active today has been the same place where they've been active all along, which tends to be front month at the money,
Which is where you guys play predominantly. I mean, in a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
we've got a lot of traction there, but I would say really our recent kind of momentum is much more broad-based.
That's good to hear. Then you're not just having a bunch of ARB wash sales going up on bats all day. There's actually the market makers are coming in there and playing and actually posting I hate to say the legitimate liquidity, but legitimate liquidity that is actually, for customers to trade against. That's good to hear. Now, obviously, you guys adopted an interesting ownership model when you launched the BATS Options Exchange, which is, of course, bringing in investors on the order flow side to incentivize volume coming that way. Is that process complete now? Have you lined up all the investors you're going to have? Are you still actively soliciting new investors?
No. So BATS, and for clarity around that, again, when we started BATS Options, there was not any sort of new ownership or change in ownership when we started. BATS is owned by a collection of firms. Some of them you probably would group as the high frequency players. So we have firms like Getco and TradeBot, and I think they're comfortable being labeled as such. We have firms that are service the brokerage community in some way, so Lime and Wedbush. And then we have a collection of primarily bulge bracket banks, global investment banks, the Citigroups and B of A Merrills, and I won't go through the whole list because I'll leave somebody off and I'll offend them. But that ownership has been the BATS ownership for long before we got into the options market.
That's true. I don't want to imply that you created the model. You kind of applied the existing BATS model to the BATS options.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great set of ownership. And a couple of years ago, when they brought me on board, they decided that the options market was continuing to evolve and change, and it made sense for BATS to enter the options market to really help drive down costs, to help continue to move the market structure forward in particular ways. And having that alignment with that ownership is a phenomenal advantage. But we see as much or more volume from many market participants that are not part of that ownership as we do from them.
Now, speaking of that ownership model, we've seen other exchanges take a similar tack recently, Amex probably being the most notable example of that, and other exchanges continually come on this show and discuss the possibility of doing it and discuss amongst themselves the possibility of following a similar tack. Does that concern you down the road as if other exchanges follow a similar type of approach? Obviously, the investors are mostly the same at the various exchanges. The liquidity providers are usually the same. Does that diminish the value of the model you guys have taken, even though you were one of the early adopters of that, to everyone else kind of coming in? It kind of levels the playing field a little bit, taking a similar approach.
Yeah, I think the short answer is no. We have great alignment with that ownership, and it helps align us with our customer base. If other exchanges can achieve that as well, good for them, right? I mean, I think that's a good thing for the industry. So you talk about the semi-remutualization of an exchange like the Amex. I don't think that diminishes what we have in any way. Again, I think it helps them from a competitive standpoint. It doesn't hurt us.
And in case our listeners are wondering, they just fired up the lawnmower here on the croquet court. So that's that deep rumbling you're hearing in the background. Jeremy is not hungry and waiting for lunch. So it's not his stomach rumbling. That is indeed the croquet lawnmowers coming in. So it has a nice little bit of ambiance, I think. Nothing says derivatives like some lawnmower noise in the background. That's what we get when we're live and outside. But speaking of the competitive landscape with options and options exchanges, obviously there's been a tremendous amount of activity on that front in the past few weeks. You guys have made your own announcements with the acquisition with Chi-X over there in Europe, and now on the domestic front, I couldn't bring you on the show without at least bringing up this topic because it's on everyone's lips down here in Boca. Of course, the big topic on the M&A front domestically is, of course, the DB NYSE potential conglomeration there. And for our perspective, we're very much, and obviously I would think for yours as well, we're more focused on the options end of that spectrum. And it's an interesting notion to have essentially going from the two exchanges they have now, which don't really compete with each other directly. I mean, one has a traditional floor-based type of model, one's an electronic maker-taker. They kind of play in different realms. Now, the notion of taking a third exchange the ISE and sticking it into that mix, which does compete with both of those exchanges on various levels. It's an interesting proposition. We've discussed it a lot on our site and on the radio shows, and we have a lot of different opinions on how those three organizations fit together, and if maybe one would be the odd man out of that scenario. So I'm curious, as someone who obviously watches this space quite a bit, what is your perspective on how that all will shake out?
Yeah, so I don't know that there is necessarily an odd man out in that potential combination, because I think you do have today, if you look at Amex and where they compete, where they live, from, like I said, a more floor-based model, a more pure classic customer priority model. You look at ARCA, which is make, take, price, time. Again, there are a couple little hybrid elements, but more of a pure price, time model. And then the ISE, I think, lives in between, where they're running, either hybrid, make, take, a little bit more of a mix. And while certainly there's some overlap on every front, I think they are appealing to and targeting three different segments of the marketplace, and that's one of the other kind of common questions. Have we seen the end of more and more options exchanges? And I can continue to be taking the over on those bets.
You'd be foolish not to, I think, at this point. Given the track record.
I think there's still plenty of room for additional kind of customer segmentation and differentiation, and the ability to compete with multiple pricing models, multiple priority models within and around that.
Yeah, that's interesting on a number of different fronts. I wouldn't say you're in the minority, but you have an interesting perspective that all three can peacefully coexist under one banner. That'll be interesting to see if they're not wasting time and resources grabbing share from each other as opposed to looking outward. Yeah, I do agree too on the exchange front. We're hearing some rumblings these days of some, in terms of new entrants, something potentially aimed more along the lines of toward the retail end of the spectrum. There's been some grumblings from different areas of retail that with this new structure where just so many, the fee structure is, to put it charitably, Byzantine amongst the different exchanges, and things like payment for order flow and internalization and leaning on different orders the way they're routed, that some people on the retail side feel there has been some disenfranchising of that audience, and maybe an exchange devoted specifically to that's at least some of the rumblings we're hearing out there in the ether. Of course, Box plays in that space now, but maybe something even more targeted than Box. I'm curious if A, if you've heard anything like that, and B, what you would think of a player aimed at that audience.
I think there's still absolutely additional opportunity to grow the retail side of the business. Like I said, Tony and the guys over at the Box are clearly focused on that as well. There are little things that even us ourselves at Bats are trying to do to help some of those market participants take more direct control of their orders and kind of maximize those relationships in a different set of incentives around them. So that fits directly into what we're trying to do with our directed order. I have not heard of another totally separate, outside of the players, new exchange in some time. It absolutely wouldn't surprise me if one came up, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, I think that's still very much in the ether, but I think a lot of that talk probably galvanized recently too with the approval of the ISE's qualified contingent cross. So I think for a lot of the people who call themselves retail champions, whether you agree with that order type or not, it kind of symbolized for them some of the the lack of transparency, lack of exposure, lack of the ability for retail to interact with some of this flow. In fact, it's just kind of getting printed and put on and executed without much real transparency. I think that's probably where a lot of these rumors are coming from. It's just in response to that filing and that order type, even though that really pretty much is par for the course on a lot of exchanges these days.
Yeah, well, and for clarity, I mean, the QCC is a 100% institutional order type. I mean, I don't know anybody on the retail front out there who's trading 1,000 contracts at a time tied to tied to cash, right? It's certainly not my grandmother. I don't know.
My grandmother was pretty savvy. I don't know. Maybe she is doing 1,000.
Yeah, she's got her PA out there swinging it around. But that's, I look at something like the QCC and I've been very vocal in saying it's a good thing for the market, and I continue to believe that today. But it's not something that's directed at the retail market at all. It's a purely institutional order type, and if we as an industry don't facilitate the growth of the institutional side of the market as well, then that volume will live in OTC world, and that doesn't help any of us.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I don't think that is the qualified contingent cross, or QCC, as you so quaintly put it, is not aimed at retail. But I think it just symbolized what a lot of people have been stewing about recently. But Jeremy, I'm glad we can bring you on here for our little live quick hits from the Boca conference, and that's about all I have for you today, unless there's something that you would like to add.
No, always happy to be here. Thank you very much.
I'm glad we can make it. I'm glad we could squeeze you on before you jet off to sunny New York for more bats wheeling and dealing. But I'm glad you can come on. We'll have to have you on again, probably down at OIC in a few months.
Look forward to it. I'll definitely be in Savannah.
All right, great. Good talking to you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Options Insider Radio. Be sure to visit www.theoptionsinsider.com for more episodes of this program, as well as breaking news from the options market, the latest articles and analysis from options experts, a wide variety of options education, and of course our discussion center where you can share your questions, comments, and insights with your fellow Options Insider users. While you're there, be sure to register for our monthly email newsletter, as well as our free email alert system. Our email alert system makes it even easier to stay up to date on the latest content from theoptionsinsider.com. Thanks again for listening. My name is Mark Longo, and I'll see you next time on Options Insider Radio.
Options Insider Radio was created by Mark Longo and produced by Gene Crotty. Options Insider Radio is a production of the Options Insider Incorporated, all rights reserved. The preceding program was a presentation of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com/radio or search for Options Insider Radio in iTunes.